All right. Hello, everyone. As you all know, my name is Blaine Jones. I'm the admissions director for the Berkeley Journalism. Uh, Today, we have a fantastic presentation being held by our Associate Dean, Professor Jeremy Rue. Michelle Kerr is here today as well, who's your Student Services Director. I'm sorry, your Graduate Student Services Advisor. And yeah, today's presentation is going to be about journalism in today's new climate. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Jeremy. Just a quick reminder, the SIR deadline is going to be May 1st. So if you haven't done so, go ahead and do that. The way to access it will be through your Slate application. You check your status page and you can go ahead and confirm your SIR. I apologize in advance for the noise in the background. The landscaper is outside and there's nothing I can do about that. But yeah, Jeremy, the show is all yours.
Great, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay? Yep, okay. So as you probably, those of you who are attentive to the news and get news alerts, you probably saw the news that they're going to read the verdict of the Chauvin trial in about an hour. So if that occurs at the tail end of this and you're curious, it won't offend me one bit if you kind of bow out. Just know that it's going to be recorded and that you can catch up. But I imagine it's probably going to be at the very tail end, probably an hour. I'm sure they're doing a lot of preparations, and it's our Slack channel at the J School is just buzzing with activity, and everyone's talking about how we're going to get together and talk about it. So it'll be interesting and see how this all turns out. So what I wanted to talk today is I kind of just wanted to show some of the work from our students. So we're living in this new era of journalism. I've been saying that for over a decade now, and I don't know at what point does it stop becoming new and just in the way it is. And I think we're right on the cusp of just basically saying this is it. It's not new anymore. And I think we're already there in some facets. But I just wanted to talk briefly before I show some of our student work about how we approach and how we think about multimedia journalism. So I teach in the multimedia program, and one of the very first lessons we do for all the incoming students is we do this multimedia boot camp, where we try to orient people with thinking about digital platforms and how to tell stories and journalistic stories on digital platforms. And the approach is to get out of the mindset um, of status quo, of thinking about a medium and separating that from sort of the organizational uh, um, standards of what they've typically done. For example, we have an audio program which does podcasts. We have a narrative writing program which focus on long form writing. We have a video program which obviously does video, documentary, short form, long form. We have multimedia, we have photo. And a lot of news organizations are still tied to a medium that is based on some kind of platform that has existed for decades. And in the early 2000s, as the web became very popular, a way of consuming journalistic media, a lot of these news organizations were very slow to adapt their content to the web. And what we saw a lot was sort of a repackaging, a repurposing of existing content on the web. So for example, NPR, I remember they reached out to us in 2008 and they said, we need some consulting. This web thing is getting really big. Everyone's, consuming media and consuming news on websites. This is before smartphones had really taken off. And so they said, and we're struggling because no one's listening to our audio on our website. And so they had at the time these 30-minute podcasts or radio segments on their web pages that you can go to a web page and you can click play and you can sit there at your computer and listen to 30 minutes. And they said, just people aren't really doing that. And it made complete sense at the time why people were not listening to radio on a website, because radio is a very different medium for a very different kind of purpose. And so people tend to listen to radio in their cars, or they tend to listen to it while they're doing. It's a passive form of consumption. You play the radio while you're doing the dishes, or you're jogging in the gym. You're doing something else. You're performing some kind of activity while the radio plays. And in fact, the definitive NPR sound guide on how to do radio lists the whole architecture of an audio story is based around this idea of a distracted listener. So the very form of journalism that is designed for the ear, for the aural experience, is really designed around the situation that a listener is in, which is in a car and they're distracted. So the sentence structure is different. In fact, the NPR sound guide, the definitive sound guide on how to do radio, says you can't just read a newspaper story over the air. It doesn't work. It's a very different writing style. Writing for the ear, writing for radio, and writing for newsprint is a very different writing style. And it makes sense because the sentences in a newspaper story, when read out loud, are very stilted and very awkward, and the structure of the story is very different. We tend to write hard news in something called the inverted pyramid, and so this is suffice to say that for decades we've based the way of doing journalism around the way people consume it. And so now the web comes about in the 2000s, and everyone's consuming media in a very different way. And so we had to kind of reinvent journalism, and we had to rethink, what does it mean to do journalism in a digital form? And we're still doing that today. In fact, one of our students, second-year students, her whole master's project is going to be revolved around producing it on TikTok. And she's had to get to know, she's younger, she's already kind of familiar with the culture and the standards and the expectations. And those few journalistic organizations that have gone on TikTok, it feels very awkward. They're trying to do serious news on a platform that's really built on people being creative and funny and doing dances and doing very creative editing where like things disappear and reappear, and so getting to know the medium, getting to know the expectations, the culture, adapting how would you adapt an in-depth investigative story to, say, Instagram, or how would you adapt a story to any number of either social media or other platforms, for mobile, for web, for an iPad, and we talk a lot about how all of these how the mode of consumption factors into how to craft and how to mold journalism, and so that we're telling the best story possible for the appropriate platform. Let me stop talking, and I'd love to just show you and what I'm talking about, and I think it would help to really see it firsthand. So I have, can everyone see? Blaine, you can see my shared screen? Yep, okay. So I have here a collection. Well, we start out, let me just show, we have a little, it's like a trailer video for our multimedia program that a couple of students helped us put together. So I'd like to play it, just a couple minutes long. I'll start with this, and then I want to actually show you the projects that went into this. So so what you're going to see is snippets of like a dozen different master's projects, and then I'll show you the individual projects after that.
Одоо энэ жил ноёдлон урд 2 жилийн өмнө бол гайгүй байсан. Энэ жил бол арай дэндүү шүү дээ.
I don't want to give up my child's life, so I'm only doing what's best.
I thought if I told them, they would see me differently. They would disown me.
It's too late to say sorry when you took someone's life.
Somebody shot at us. They're trying to scare us.
And it's quick money. It's better than selling drugs.
Cop jumps out and starts harassing your friends and pull out their camera and start recording. I bet you'll do your job right.
It's not easy. But no choice. I'm single mother. I need to fight.
So a couple of things you'll notice is we do a fair bit of international reporting. That's something we have a travel grant funding that we do, that we provide. It's competitive, but we support financially students to travel all over the world to report on important stories, and we put them together in these packages. And you saw at the end there a collection of stories and a few others that I might not get to, but if you're curious, you can ask about them and I can direct you to them. The first one I wanted to show is an interesting story a couple of years ago that is, some students did on this idea of lithium, the element, not the drug. And basically, it started with a question, which was the idea that as batteries become more important in electric cars and in powering homes and all sorts of different technology, we're sort of replacing oil with lithium. And these lithium batteries now are just they're in everything. They're in all of your electronics, all your smartphones. And she said, if we're replacing oil with lithium, like where does lithium come from? What's its ecological impact? Like, what does this mean? So we said, this is a good story. So I said, let's report it. And so she learned very quickly that most of the world's lithium comes from Bolivia. And let me see, I think I can play. And so she goes on a trip to Bolivia and the salt flats there, and the great salt flats in Bolivia's deserts, and talks about how this is going to reshape the Bolivian economy. She also went to China, where almost all of the batteries end up. Let me pause this for a second here. So she shot most of this with her with her smartphone. And so she goes and we say, you need to shoot some video. She's like, well, I'm not really a video student. And I said, no, that's okay. Use your smartphone if you want to. So I just wanted to point that out, and a drone. So there's smartphone video and a drone in this.
Lithium would become as important as oil and would eventually displace it. But in order for electric vehicles to be part of a new techno paradigm, you need Bolivia.
So these are just little video snippets. The story is anchored by, I think it's maybe a 10,000 word story that gets into a lot of the different facets, the extraction, the economy. There's a political side to it because the Bolivian government is really skeptical about outsiders coming in. But they lack some of the expertise and there's some geopolitics going on. And then she goes to China, where most of the lithium batteries end up as e-waste, and talks about the environmental impacts there. And it was a great project. And she went with another student, so two students paired up, and they basically filmed this whole project and reported it. And I thought it was a pretty decent project. And here's another one that was done by another student in the class. She took a class called Earth Journalism we offer, and Earth Journalism basically funds travel to do environmental stories. And so the story she wanted to do was based on an island in the South Pacific that's sinking, and they're gonna have to relocate the So as you're scrolling through the website, it kind of unveils the next chapter. And we're using these storytelling techniques. We call it like chunkifying, basically kind of creating these small short paragraphs. So the writing style changes than you would from, say, like a magazine story or a or a newspaper story. And we're talking about the timing of the video. Okay, so there's this plane that brings, so in order to get this to this desolate island in the middle of the South Pacific, there's a plane that goes once a week, and she has to go with some missionaries and to get there and to film. And so this island is sinking, and they're going to have to relocate these indigenous inhabitants who have lived there thousands of years, and through no fault of their own, they're going to lose their home, right? And it kind of sucks because of the realities of all of these external factors. And so she spends some time there to kind of get to know the community and to get to know the folks. And so she talks to the one islander who can speak English, and to basically talk about the family situation and what it's like. And so. This was a project that was done where some students started to report of one of the students got her cell phone stolen. And she realized that this is a really big issue of this idea of stolen cell phones. And it's really, cell phone theft is such a major issue. It's basically skewed all of the crime statistics in all of the major cities throughout the US. And the more she started to research it, she realized that there's an entire economy around stolen cell phones. And in fact, by gram by the weight, a stolen cell phone fetches more money than its equivalent weight in, say, cocaine. And if you're caught with a stolen cell phone, it's like a slap on the wrist compared to, getting caught with a significant amount of drugs. And so it's a lot. There's this whole economy that's developed where it's incredibly organized. So they told this story through a lot of videos, and it was a group of students that worked together on this.
The thief tries to turn it into cash as quickly as possible, sometimes in minutes. The thief seeks out a buyer or fence who pays cash for phones.
So this is part of our Animating the News class. We have a class that teaches some motion graphics animation, and so they tell this story through this animation role play.
Street. Once they have a bag full of phones, they take it to a seemingly legitimate cell phone repair shop that pays cash for used phones, no questions asked. These businesses have international connections. Here at the shop, phones stolen on the street are packaged up with other phones obtained illegally through contract fraud and identity theft. Bundled together, they are shipped abroad, most often to Hong Kong or Dubai. Because of their small size, phones can be sent via standard delivery packages, placed in luggage, or even taped to people's bodies. In some cases, the phones are packed into shipping containers, often with other stolen goods. No one knows exactly how many phones are leaving the country each year. But in 2012, just one business got busted after sending almost 400,000 stolen phones abroad.
So they went to Brazil and they reported sort of where these phones end up, and they went to all these repair shops. The story was published in the National Geographic, and it was it was nominated for an Emmy, and it was just this wonderful story that our students, and they went on some raids. They went to these repair shops where they repackaged the phone as if they're new, so they have this way of wiping it clean and reflashing it, and just basically, it's a whole economy where within a few days, if you've ever had a cell phone stolen, it just ends up in somewhere around the world and resold and repackaged. This was another project that a group of students, so our whole multimedia class, and there's about 10 to 12 students each year in our multimedia class, they decided to get together and do a joint project, the whole class. They said, because usually it's students do their individual master's projects, but the whole class said, we want to work together on something. And they were really fascinated with this idea of inequality. And so we looked up some of the data, and the place with the highest inequality in California is this place in the Central Valley called Fresno. It's a city in Fresno, and it has the starkest divide, and it manifested in a number of ways. One of the things we do when we're looking at journalistic stories is we try to look at what we call the ripple effects. So it's not so much about the story itself that happens, but it's about sort of the periphery and all of this, the different kind of ancillary, consequences of whatever situation you're looking at. So, stories manifest themselves in innumerable ways. From a single incident or occurrence. And so, so here we're tackling inequality, and there's economic inequality in Fresno. The city's deeply divided. And so what are some of the ways that manifests? And so they did a collection of stories. The whole package was published in the Atlantic. And so this was a single story. And then basically the Atlantic ran each one of the student stories in this kind of wonderful spread. So over the past year, graduate students at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism reported deeply in Fresno's past, and then they published it. So it was really cool. And a couple of the stories, I just plucked out a few of them just to show you. One was this really cool story about how a lot of the workers who work on farms live within the fields. And so there's heavy regulation about these dangerous pesticides. There's these certain pesticides that are particularly dangerous. They spray them, and if you breathe them in, it can really cause you can get sent to the hospital. And so she reported how there's all these regulations about where they can spray. So that it has to be within a certain distance of things like schools and other locations, but it doesn't include homes of where people live. And so a lot of, so this is how a victory in pesticide regulation around schools doesn't help the students when they go home, because all of these students who have parents who work in the fields, they end up going home, and these spraying occurs when school's out, but then it hits over home. And she got some really great footage of basically the spray. You can literally see the cloud, and they go inside, and they kind of used to closing their windows, and the number of people who have suffered ill effects from the situation. This was another story from the Inequality Project, which was also a product from the animation class. There's a question in the chat. Same question. Let's see. Templated web software, is that all code? All of this is custom coded. We teach HTML, CSS classes, so students will code it. There's a few like templates that we have just because you do the same thing over and over again. So we have some web templates that students have used from previous projects, or that we've had at the schools, that kind of like a starter HTML template, and then they'll add the code. But we don't use, this is not like Squarespace or anything like that. This is all coded. And for animation, this is all After Effects animation. Some of the After Effects, it does come from some templates. And so like the graphics that you saw on the cell phone one, you can buy some of the graphics, and so that you can place them and move them in specific ways. This one was hand drawn by the student that I'm about to show. This story is about how in Fresno, when an unaccompanied minor is caught by immigration, they have to fend for themselves in immigration court. It's really an interesting situation where when you in the United States, when you are charged with a crime, you have right to representation. So you have a right to a public attorney, and that will represent you. For immigration purposes, you don't have that right. So you basically have to fend for yourself. Now, if you get caught by ICE in, say, somewhere near like San Francisco, there's a lot of pro bono immigration services that will represent you. But if you happen to live in Fresno, there's nobody. And so a lot of these unaccompanied minors that get caught in Fresno, and there's quite a few of them, have to go and stand before a judge. And some of them are as young as 4 years old. So imagine a 4-year-old standing before a judge in immigration court, and they basically have to fend for themselves. They have no representation at all. And so this image was so stark, and she tried really hard to get into the immigration court. In fact, we sat down with the judge, and the judge we have all these lengthy interviews with the judge, and she was wonderful, and she gave us complete access, but she said, you absolutely cannot take a camera into the court. She wouldn't allow it. So we're stuck. We need to show this image. We need people to empathize and to have a relatable experience to understand the story. So she took the animating class, and she said, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to draw. And said, well, we just draw outlines. And so here, I'll show you just a little bit of the video.
Cameras aren't allowed inside the San Francisco Immigration Court, but if they were, you'd see something like this. The courtroom looks like a pediatrician's office. Children as young as 4 years old line the benches of the courtroom. One by one, they stand alone before the judge, without an attorney to help them understand the legal system they're navigating. More than 200,000 unaccompanied children have traveled to the U.S. alone in the past 4 years. Most of them come from the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Most of them are running from gang violence or hoping to reunite with family in the States. They travel alone through Mexico to reach the U.S. border, where they turn themselves in to U.S. immigration officers. Once here, children are required to appear in immigration court, a civil court, which means they have the right to an attorney, but the government won't pay for it. Children have to
So that's the basis of the story, and they spoke to some of these pro bono attorneys. They spoke to some kids that, after they had gotten out of court. And it turns out that having an attorney is a really big deal, because if you have an attorney, you pretty much have like an 80-90% chance of staying in the United States and kind of working the case and finding solutions. And it's the complete opposite. If you don't have an attorney, you're basically going to get deported. And so, and the very mere fact that you're in Fresno because of the location, you're kind of screwed. And so these are just a collection of some of the stories, and I'll share links if you want to get in a little bit deeper. But these all ran in the Atlantic. This is this is an older slide. This is one of our students from 2012 or 13. So I add these projects over the years. Every year I add a few projects to this presentation. And so this is, I don't know if you guys remember, there's this device called Google Glass, which everyone thought was going to be the next big thing, and it wasn't. But we bought a set of these Google Glass. You could buy, like, you could get your hands on them. And one of the things about them is they had a camera in them for point of view video recording. So which is kind of creepy in most contexts. But this is Avni, and Avni had this interesting idea where she said, well, I want to do this story about violence against women in India on public transportation. And a lot of women in India and in different cities in India, they get groped and molested on public transportation, and it's a real struggle of getting assaulted and just trying to get to work. And she goes, I want to take this Google Glass and I want to ride the public transportation. And she ended up doing this really interesting approach to the story. It sounds trivializing it because she wanted to do it like a video game, but it's not a video game that you play to like for fun, but it's a way to experience the journey of getting to work. So it's a kind of a choose your own adventure experience where you're following a woman and you're faced with these decisions. And it says, do you take this route? Do you go on the, in the cab, or do you take the train, or do you walk, or do you do this? And do you want to talk to these? And they have these interstitial moments where she talks to people and to these women about what this means. And so, so I'll play the trailer for that real quick.
This is always being talked about. Women, safety, gender, patriarchy. What does it mean to be a woman? What is the change that we are looking for? What is safety? This is being spoken of all the time. The thing that's changed now is that we are threatening to do something about it.
The rates of crime against women in Delhi is ridiculously high.
what is wrong and what is right.
So is this experience where, as you play, for lack of a better word, this interactive experience, you're given these choices. You're asked who to speak to, and we use this platform, this experimental platform for doing these kind of videos. It was a really interesting approach, and that's one of the things I think we embrace a lot at Berkeley is. And I'll show some more examples of these projects, but thinking outside the box, right? Taking an active participant role in telling a story in an innovative or unconventional way. The industry doesn't always embrace that, and that's okay. But I think they get kudos. Our students get kudos for even attempting it. So some of our students would maybe do something really unconventional and experimental and innovative, and they'll put it in their portfolio, and they might apply to the Washington Post or the New York Times, and they say, and those are pretty innovative companies nowadays, but typically they would never run something like this back in the day, and they would look at it though, and they would say, you know what, this is really cool, and they would give a lot of cred to our students for even trying such interesting ideas, and this is one of the things we embrace a lot. This is a story about the destruction. So there's always these stories about how they build a dam, and it ruins the ecology and the water system and the rivers, and the salmon runs, and so we had a student who said, I want to report a positive story about the removal of a dam. So in up in Washington, they basically were going to removing. So he made this website where he did this trip. So for several days, he rafted this river, and he did this as a student. He somehow convinced us that this was serious journalism. And anyways, he filmed the destruction there. You got right there, time-lapse destruction of the dam, set up a camera, and it took a year, and comes and took a few trips to get the footage. And so as you kind of scroll down, you can see the journey and the different points, and then the salmon did return after they took the after they took down the dam, and so it was the salmon came back. This is a story from 2015. This was before its time, but basically it talked about the way people's explosion of using cell phones to film police really reshaped policing, and so one of the things that these students did is they made a database of all of these police incidences that were being posted to YouTube and other platforms, and they just amassed this huge database, spoke to a lot of different community members, officers, people who film, and so they organized this, and so that you can kind of get a sense, and a very germane topic even today. This was a story where this is our first time, and this was also in 2016, I want to say this project was experimenting with 360 video. So we got this 360 video rig, and it's about refugees in Europe, from Syrian refugees, and so they went over there, and it was a real learning curve for us, because shooting 360 video is such a radical departure from what we understand about video, because when you're doing flat video, linear video on like a flat screen is what we say, you have these cuts, these edits, you're looking for reaction shots, and with 360, the person becomes the camera, and so we had to learn sort of the rules and implement them into our curriculum. And so one of the things in this particular case is, this would be shot differently today, is the camera has to be at eye level, because if you put the camera too high, people feel like they're floating, especially if they view these experiences in VR with a set of goggles. And if you put the camera too low, then it looks like you're really tiny and looking up at everybody. So there's this inclination when you're shooting flat video to put the camera in interesting places. We do this all the time in video. You put the camera on the floor, you put it up high, because we like seeing the world from different perspectives. But when you do it in 360, it looks really awkward. You feel like you're floating, and it's just, okay, this is not a very comfortable viewpoint. And then, there's a whole standard of ethics. When you're filming this stuff, we set up these 360 video cameras, and you kind of have to leave the room. You kind of set it up and in a room somewhere, and you have to leave and let the scene unfold in the kind of what we call a verite style. And then you come back and you turn the camera off and you hope you got some great footage. So it's so different because normally you're standing behind the camera and you're thinking very consciously about how to compose your shot. So it was a really interesting learning curve, and there's a lot of logistics in terms of just how to stitch the pieces together, and there's ethical considerations about what you leave out of the frame, and so it was a great experience, and those are experiences that I think were important for our students to kind of go on that journey with us. Same thing with drone. We bought a bunch of drones because we realized aerial photography became this big thing. So we bought a whole set of drones and now have a drone aerial. We call it instead of calling it a drone class, we called it a drone class, and a lot of people thought we were, I don't know, doing something weird with drones, but now we call it aerial photography. But you get your license. You have to get licensed through the FFA, and you take a test, and you have to learn all these rules in order to fly drones for commercial purposes. And so our students can get licensed as a drone operator and film for a documentary film or whatever. And now the aerial shot, as you've seen several of them, the one in Mongolia from the trailer at the front, is sort of a staple of scene setting shots in filmmaking now, and a lot of documentary films. And just having these drone shots is just something that we do a lot now, and it's become a sort of the standard for filming. This was another class project that we did. A bunch of students in 2017 said, hey, we want to do another, like they did before, we want to do a big class project together. And so they did something on work. And so you start with the topic, like, working in California, working in the shadow of the Golden State. And, we look at the ripple effect, right? We look at some of the ways labor and jobs. So they looked at things like, what is it called? I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. Workers' compensation when you get injured on the job. They looked at, recycling with dangerous jobs, OSHA, recycling workers. They looked at, there was an investigative story about kind of uncovering some corruption in the workers' comp case. And anyways, there was one video, one of the students, she wanted to really do a story on women who worked in construction and sort of the harassment and that they face, and it's endemic in that world. And so here I'll just show a short clip from that.
They've treated me a certain type of way because I'm a woman, but how they do it, it's like they try to joke afterwards to make me not feel like that's what they're doing. Like today, for example, I was at work and the guys were talking, and most of the time when I say something, they either ignore me or they act like they don't know, so I just stopped trying to help out. And I had went to go stand by another foreman, right? And then he was like, I'm thinking they should just tilt it like this and do that and then just stick it in there. And I said, me too, but he said, well, don't nobody care what a dumb girl has to say about it.
Some of them just wanted to talk about porn or take me to a machine room and try to kiss me or expose themselves.
He just felt up the front of my body.
And one of them grabbed me from behind and humped on me.
He pushed her down a concrete stairway.
Yeah, so sorry, I should have gave a trigger warning, but like these stories, these are really powerful stories. We try to get them published and get them out there, and but there's so many incredible stories to be told, in both the Bay Area and broader. And so this was actually a local story. The student who shot this did it mostly in Oakland and Emeryville and in the Bay Area, because there's plenty of construction going on nearby. And just, it was really fascinating. It started off with this kind of a nugget of an idea of like, oh, women who work in construction. I'd love to profile some of them and what that experience is like, to really uncover that this really basic an industry that is just consumed with sexual assault, and it's almost like the military. And so, this is another story that was a collection for another class project. This one was a little while back in 2012, and it's a collection of stories on food. And so these are food stories, and we called it The Ration. And I'll play there's a short trailer that kind of, we do a lot of these little trailers for our projects, and so that we can kind of explore them. And one of the so some of the stories were like looking at there was these what they call them, gag laws. So basically, there were these laws that said you can't film in some industries because activists would use this footage to kind of show the cruelty to animals that's going on, and so they've passed all of these laws that say basically if you film, you wear a secret hidden camera and you film in some of these factories, and you know, it's a felony. And so that was one of the stories. There was the stories about let me try to remember now. About open source manufacturing of farm equipment. Basically, there's a whole monopolization of farm equipment by a few companies, and so it really prevents like small farms from really being viable, because you can't buy and purchase any of the necessities you need to do farming. And so there's a whole kind of subculture that popped up around, you know, sharing how to build your own kind of materials, and open sourcing it on the web, and they're trying to shut that down. This one, I just want to show one of the projects, again, thinking outside the box. This was back when you know, the grocery manufacturers industry was wanting to redesign the food, the nutrition facts label that you see on the side of packaged materials, foods, and she thought, oh, the Grocery Manufacturers Association is going to redesign the food label for themselves. So of course they're going to probably make everything look more positive because it has such a big influence. People like to look at these nutrition facts labels. And she thought, what if we redesigned it? But it seemed kind of weird, like how would we approach that? So instead of us redesigning it, she held a contest and got about 70 submissions. We publicized the contest and sent it out to design schools and other places and put a little ad, and got about 70 submissions from designers. And she put a panel together. Let me see, I think I have. She put a panel of judges, which included nutritionists and doctors and designers. And people had different innovative ideas about, you know, thinking about, you know, showing the percentage and what, you know, the constituent parts and little charts and pie charts. And anyways, you know, it got actually some notoriety, and they got some buzz back then. And you know, the local TV, you know, they did a story on it. Unfortunately, none of these designs were adopted by the Grocery Manufacturer Association, but it was kind of a cool, unconventional idea. And the student, she works at Politico now, but it's projects like these that we embrace, just things that are sort of, I don't know, just like trying something new than traditional journalism, especially if you come into the school having already, you know, some traditional journalism under your belt. And if you say, you know, I've already written a long form story and I've already done that, I want to learn, I want to try, experiment and try something new. There's definitely, we can embrace things like that. I'm going to skip ahead. Okay, so this was, well, so this was a traditional story. This was a student whose master's project was about a helicopter crash. One of his friends died in a helicopter crash, and he realized as he went to the funeral and he started talking to people. You know, a lot of it was a naval helicopter, and then a lot of his Navy buddies were basically saying, yeah, this helicopter has some serious problems with it. It's a really dangerous. It should be grounded, and they keep forcing us to fly it. And a lot of the naval pilots have what they call hung up their wings, refused to fly it because it's so dangerous. And so it turned out to be this big little nugget of an idea, just ballooned to this big project. And so for his master's project, he did this whole piece on the thing. And here's just play a little.
Now to an NBC News investigation into an aircraft the U.S. Navy trusts with the lives of our service members in the course of a vital mission, the detection of underwater mines. It's the MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopter, and its safety record is alarming. Dozens have been killed in these choppers over the years. Now, in partnership with the Virginian Pilot newspaper and the Berkeley Investigative Reporting Program, our senior investigative correspondent, Cynthia McFadden, takes a closer look at why the Sea Dragons are still in the air.
So, and then he turned it into a documentary. He turned it into the film. It won several awards at various film festivals, and it was shown. And so it's called "Who Killed Lieutenant Van Dorn?" because, that was the name of the one of the main pilots who spoke up against this helicopter, saying it had an abysmal safety record, and of course the helicopter failed and on him and killed him. And so a lot of people have been killed by this helicopter, and the Navy continues to use it. So investigative project. I just wanted to show that that's also part of our repertoire. And I can go into a little bit deeper into any of these projects if you're curious and want to know more about them. But I just kind of want to showcase and just to kind of show you what we're about, the kind of ambitious stories that our students regularly take on, and what we're about. I don't know, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. I haven't gotten any news alerts, so I don't think anything's happening yet in terms of national news right now. But does anyone have any questions? Something in the, what was the labor collaboration? So the labor collaboration was not published like the Atlantic. The Atlantic was really cool because it ran the whole package of all of our inequality stories that year. The labor package was more just like published in a lot of different places. So the individual stories, some of them ran in the San Francisco Chronicle, Center for Investigative Reporting, CIR Reveal. Some of them ran on KQED. Some of them ran on, I want to say, somewhere in Sacramento Bee, maybe it ran one. I think Sacramento Bee ran one. And it was like a whole bunch of different publications that ran different stories. Oh, NPR ran one of the stories. So it wasn't like a whole package that we did the prior year. And so, how long does it take to prepare for this kind of project? Great question in the chat. Yeah, please feel free to, if you don't want to ask in person. Our students do this all the time. In Zoom land, you can just put it in the chat. So that's a good question. How long does it take to prepare a project like this? So we take a year. So we start in the fall, in the second year of your study. You're taking other classes at this time, so it's not like it's not the only thing you're doing. And we start to brainstorm. We go through a couple months and brainstorming exercises. We do pitches, and it depends on which track you're on. So the timing is a little bit different. So for example, our long form video track gets you start going right away because you do 3 videos for that track. And so since you do 3 10-minute videos, I want to say, yeah, 8 to 10 minute videos, which are like 60-minute like type videos, they have you do one right away, and then they have you rest up during winter break, and then they have you do the other 2 in the spring. The documentary program is almost all planning during the fall semester, and you do all your shooting in the over winter break. So it's a little bit different. And then same thing for multimedia. For multimedia, we do most of the planning, and we try to get production going before winter break if it's feasible. And so we started taking trips to different places. But especially if you're doing international reporting, I didn't show the Mongolia piece, but the Mongolia piece was a story that a student did in basically. In fact, I'll just pull them up so you guys can see them. Basically about the air quality in Mongolia. And so it's some of the worst air quality in the world. And I'll share my screen. So let's see, where is it? So these are all the projects and stuff. And so, there's some more of the Fresno projects. And so here's City of Smoke. So this one, was a year's worth of planning. I didn't show this one, but basically you can just, the smog is incredible. And it has to do with because people use burn coal for heat. And it's just, it's the population has increased and the number of homes have increased so substantially over the years that it's, they update. Thanks for the update. So yeah, so that's going to be guilty on some, but not all charges. So we're going to probably see a lot going on in the Bay Area. And Oakland is pretty active, and they do a lot of protests in Oakland, and that's which is a city. If you're not familiar with the Bay Area, Berkeley is, it's the adjacent city. Oakland is sort of a big city, so there's a lot of stories in Oakland, and it's 15 minutes away from Berkeley. So. And so, so this is the Mongolian project, and we do a lot of interesting approaches. It's a long form story, and going inside is one of the cool things that we really want to do is kind of to see what it looks like inside some of these yurts where people, they use these different kind of stoves. And so we created this little thing. He actually had brought out this big device with him so that you could kind of walk around essentially inside one of these yurts. So you can kind of get a sense of like what a family, where they would live. And why, there's the stove, which is the focal point of the story, and the coal, and it's adding up, and you can't really ask a community like this to just stop burning coal because they need it for heat, but it's the smog has just gotten completely untenable, and so and it's just and the number of asthma cases, the number of people dying, it's just extraordinary. So, and a few I can show other projects as well if anyone's curious about any of the others. But yeah, it takes about a year. That's what we devote the second year of study to. So, other questions? Everybody's probably looking at the news. All right. Well, I'll probably let people go a little early. And so if you're curious, as you should be, and all of our students are news junkies, and they all like to really see what's going on in the world. And we actually require in a lot of our classes, for people to read the week's headlines, and so that when you come to class, we talk about how the news was covered and from week to week. And so you get a subscription to the New York Times and Wall Street Journal as part of just being a Berkeley student. So there's an expectation that you read those two publications, and as well as others. And so if anyone has any other questions, I can hang out for another 3 minutes. Otherwise, thanks so much for sitting in and seeing what we're about. We have a hand up. Is she Wu? I hope I'm not mispronouncing it.
No problem. No, that's right. Yeah, I just have a quick question because I'm not planning to do any of this multimedia track, but now I'm so interested. I asked the question about the timing. I just wonder, like, how do we know that we want to incorporate this multimedia element into the story when we are planning for our final project? So, yeah.
So you decide which track you're going to take in April of your first year. So you start the program in the fall, you go through the whole fall semester, then you go through most of the spring semester. So our first year students are deciding right now, like, which one should I want? And so you have a lot of time to think about it. And then the tracks, we kind of don't like that word tracks because it sounds so rigid. You could take classes, if you want to learn how to make a podcast, take the podcast class. You want to do animation, take the animation class. You want to do the sound design class, take the sound design class. You know, take the coding class. I teach the web coding classes and learn how to program. So you take whatever classes you want, and you could be a documentary student and say, I'm going to be a documentary filmmaker, go through that whole program and take coding, take podcasts, take photography. So you learn and you kind of shape your journey through the curriculum based on what you want to learn. The track part of it only means that's the medium you do your master's project in.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Oh, yes, another thing about, I heard that you mentioned about the drone certificate, like people who have to get a drone certificate to do those kind of reporting. And I just wonder, would that be something that we can learn in the J school, or should we like study outside?
Yes, that's a good question. So we've offered the drone class for the past 3-4 years now. I think maybe 4 years, but it's not a permanent part of our curriculum. So I'm very hesitant to promise it because it could get cut one day. I doubt it'll get cut. I'm pretty sure we're gonna keep it in perfect because it's so valuable. I think it'll be here. I would bank on it. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry, we had somebody accidentally unmuted. And so, yeah, we can, the drone class, I'm almost positive it'll still be available if you come in. It's going to be offered this fall. So if anyone coming in this fall, the drone class. Other questions? Other questions?
Is the drone license only good in California?
It's good in the United States. So it's not, it's international, it gets really complicated. We fly under the radar, I guess that's what you could say. So we've taken drones internationally, but the laws vary from country to country. And we've not yet had one confiscated, but I'm pretty sure that's going to happen eventually. I don't like to talk about, the risky situations our students get into, but journalism is ambitious. But I mean, we'd never force anyone into situations. But some of the footage that you saw was some students in Afghanistan. They did a story on climbers and they got shot at, and so we've sent students to conflict zones over the years, and we do trainings, and we have extraction services available for. But it's there's some parts that are risky. Of course, you don't have to take on any of those kinds of stories if you're not up for it, and we don't encourage it. In fact, more often than not we discourage it. But our students are ambitious and they want to tell important stories, and so but yeah, for drones, it's United States license, and you have to learn all of the rules. So there's a lot of restrictions about where you can fly and how you can fly, and you have to keep line of sight of the drone at all times, and you have to sometimes have a separate person. You have to log your flight plan beforehand. There's a lot of bureaucratic stuff. But if you take it internationally, it all changes, and so it gets complicated. Oh, we're over time, so thank you, everybody. And if you have follow-up questions, please just let Blaine know, and you can funnel them to me, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Professor Rue.
Sounds good. Have a good evening.